Welcome back to My Trauma's Chronic, but on My Chronic's podcast. I'm thrilled to have you join us for another episode where we delve into the captivating world of workplace well-being. In today's fast-paced and ever-evolving professional landscape, prioritizing mental health and fostering inclusive environments has become more critical than ever. Picture this: a workplace where every individual feels valued, supported, and empowered to bring their whole selves to work, where differences are not only embraced but celebrated, where mental health isn't just a buzzword, but a core value embedded in the fabric of organizational culture. That's a vision we're striving for here at My Trauma's Chronic, but I'm my Chronic. So whether you're a seasoned HR professional, an aspiring leader, or simply someone who believes in the power of creating better, more compassionate workplaces, I invite you to join us on this adventure. Subscribe to My Trauma's Chronic but My Chronic's podcast today, and let's embark on a transformative journey towards a brighter, more inclusive future. Get your cup of tea, get cozy, and let's get started. Beatriz, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. So my name is Beatriz Biosca. I actually come from Spain, which you will be able to very quickly tell from my accent. But I've been here in the UK for on and off for about 20 years now. So hopefully my English is now good enough that everybody will be able to understand me, or at least that's the hope. My background academically is in clinical and health psychology. And I have been working on the sales arena for both international health insurance and mental health solutions for the workplace, more on the tech side. So that's what I've been doing for the last 15 years of my life. More recently, I was working for a company called Unmind, which I'm sure you will be familiar with, which actually its speciality is to provide mental health solutions in the workplace, also manager training and leadership support to ensure that cultures can flourish within organizations and where employees can bring their best selves to work.
Can you walk us through any sort of pivotal moments in your life or your career that inspired you to focus specifically on enterprise well-being, neurodivergence, and that trauma?
Sure. So, as a late diagnosed ADHDer, I have struggled in the workplace most of my life without even knowing what was wrong with me. So I always had this ingrained belief that I had to work harder to reach the same level as my peers. I had constant double guessing, difficulty following instructions at times, so I really felt like I really had to step it up without really actually knowing what was going on, right? So I just assumed that there was a fault within me. Being diagnosed later on in life, that really helped me understand that the issue didn't really lie in something that I didn't have enough of, but really something that I had too much of, which is attention, right? So, there's this misconception that ADHD is a disorder of lack of attention. But in reality, the thing is you are able to be attentive to so many different details at the same time, right? So that gets confusing, it gets distracting. Once I found out I had the ADHD, everything changed for me. I already had a huge passion for mental health, but understanding where my struggles came from and being able to actually find coping mechanisms for it really inspired me to be really in an environment and create an environment for others where they could do the same, right? So this is a major passion for me. So bringing awareness to neurodivergence in general, it's very, very important, particularly in the workplace, because unfortunately we bring this to the workplace with us, and we have these ingrained fears, this trauma that we have developed over the years. For many of us that haven't been diagnosed, even neurodivergents that are diagnosed are still masking on a constant basis just to be able to function in a workplace where the environment is not necessarily appropriate to their needs. So this is really where it comes from. Other than that, my passion for mental health has been there from the very beginning, probably because I was undiagnosed as well. But yeah, I've always been very empathetic, and I've always wanted to dedicate my life to, supporting others, helping others, really reach their potential.
Ah, that's so lovely. I feel like, especially when you're, people that work with you are, have like diagnosed, like or self-diagnosed or diagnosed like neurodivergence or mental health difficulties, it enhances their ability to care on a different level. And that's just,
Mhm.
such a different you know, different level of care that you'll receive because so it comes a different level of understanding and different approaches, much more unique, much more bespoke. Um, in your opinion, you work in enterprise wellbeing. What have you what are do you think are the primary reasons why mental health is often overlooked or neglected in many workplace environments?
Mhm. Well, first of all, mental health is a topic that has been stigmatized, historically. So we are all getting better at it. We're getting better at talking about mental health and understanding that we all have mental health. However, it is still a topic that many people find very difficult to discuss. And this also translates into leadership for many enterprise organizations. So I think first and foremost, it's about understanding, as I said, that everybody has mental health. It can vary. It can vary throughout time, whether it's on a daily basis or whether, it is on an hourly basis, but we all have it. So, the first step, I believe, is trying to remove that stigma. But that is a process and it takes time. So it all begins with working with leadership, really helping them understand what the concepts are and what they can actually do, to create that culture of mental well-being where everybody can discuss this and with, a sense of naturality and vulnerability and acceptance.
When an organization hires a consultant like yourself, what unique perspectives or insights do you bring into organizations in terms of promoting mental health and well-being?
Right. So first of all, I think it's important to have a very open discussion with leadership about what's going on. So what do they perceive as being the main issues within the organization? Do they have a pulse of what is happening for their particular organization? Do they know how many people are actually, unwell because of mental health issues? Do they have that data? So really understanding where the data comes from, what the understanding is the first step, right? A lot of the time, we make assumptions. We're human beings, we think that there is a sickness leave, it is increasing. But unless people are willing to measure these things, and again, it's quite a difficult thing to do, it is very difficult to really understand where the issue lies. As you know very well, some organizations or most of the organizations will do employee surveys to understand, get an understanding from the employees themselves of what might be, the issue that is underlying, right? However, we also know as employees ourselves that most of the time people are not necessarily honest because there is a mistrust there. Are my results going to be, or am I going to be tracked, right? If I give honest answers, is this going to repercute me in any negative way? And a lot of the times people decide not to be as honest as they could be, right? So that doesn't help. So again, this adds to the difficulty in getting that data that is ever so important. But really, that is the first step, understanding. So leadership, what do you know today, right? There is a lot of data that can be obtained from insurance, right? So if you have your health insurance data, you won't be able to know which employees because it's all anonymized, of course, but you'll be able to see, for example, how many people have been receiving mental health treatment, right? But again, it's not a true representation. Why? Because there's a lot of people needing mental health services that will never access them, even though they know they need them, again, because of that stigma. So how do we circumvent the problem? So there is one way, and that only way is to create that sense of safety, psychological safety within the organization. And that starts, in my opinion and my experience, with leadership actually living in that way. So telling storytelling is incredibly powerful. So I once worked with a leader that opened a meeting explaining how anxious he was about the meeting and how anxiety had dominated his life and, really giving him this sense of psychological worry on a constant basis, feeling that he was less than, feeling that he would be found out, or what we know as imposter syndrome, right? And it changed the whole atmosphere in 5 minutes. everybody became much more open, much more engaged. And honestly, the atmosphere became so positive all of a sudden. It was one of cooperation, of support. And that's what you want. You want leadership to be able to demonstrate what they want their employees to do, right? In this case, if you want them to be able to open up, you need to do the same.
Absolutely. I feel like transparency is very, very important. I think with my organization in itself, we've got quite a few members of staff, and I feel like I can't expect them to behave or act in accordance with what I want if I do not act like that. For example, something as simple as like having cameras on, right? Every single meeting, my camera's always on. I may be muted, but I will contribute as much as I want to contribute, or when I have an idea or something like that, to set an example. And that is just on like a organizational level, but to achieve that, you also need to create that psychological safety that, you need. At times you might need to be flexible, you might need to be understanding, even if you're unable to fix a problem, you can to be able to offer that reassurance. And
I agree.
sometimes the world needs to be a corporate world, but at times that corporate level is just not needed. It needs that personal touch to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? At the end of the day, we're all human beings, right? Corporate organizations are still organizations composed by human beings, right? I've worked in both. I've worked for a Fortune 4 and I've worked for startups where you start with 30 employees, sometimes 200 employees. I can tell you, at the end of the day, it does not matter. What matters is the connection that you create with the human beings that are part of your organization, right? So are they feeling valued? Are they feeling heard? Are you human to them, right? Are you approachable as a leader? Are you actually a person that is able to discuss and understand certain things? And the issue here, and I think you will probably agree with me, is that, a lot of the times we are hiring or even, promoting individuals to leadership positions because they're very, very good at what they do, and it is well earned. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they have the people skills necessary to lead teams, right? Those are two very different things. You can be an absolute genius at what you do and yet not have that, human touch because you've never had to use it, or you just simply have not developed those or honed on those skills, right? So again, another very, very, very important aspect of, really creating a culture of psychological safety is to provide the necessary training and give that support to your managers. First line, leadership, all of them. The manager is a person that will influence 100%, the life, if you want, or the work life of the employees themselves. So you need to ensure that that manager has enough skills to be able to have difficult conversations, to, have the empathy, to know what to say when someone is grieving or someone is coming back from a long-term absence due to, it could be anything, mental health issues, it could be health-related issues, it could be family issues. Like, how do you have that sensitivity? How do you approach people that are struggling with a particular issue in their life, like a divorce? And do you understand and have the empathy and care and ability to support that person through that to a certain level? Because it's a work environment. But what can you do as a manager to support those employees during all these life transitions, which are going to happen and which will invariably have an effect on their, productivity, because it is a fact of life. So what can you do as an employee, as a manager, to support them so that they can still bring their best and continue developing that sense of loyalty and, value for their work, even though they are going through those moments, because we will all go through those moments, right? So yeah, this is why I think it must be a part of every single work well-being program as a vital component and as a first line if you want, of change.
Hmm. I feel like often, I feel like that sort of like culture needs to be started from when it was in the early stages. It is you can implement it, when it's grown and stuff like that, but it's just much harder to do. Like anything in life. I feel like often organizations, this is where they fail because they're chief executive or they're a manager in the role, but because they give 140%, they expect their like staff to do that. And I'm like, it's your organization. You're gonna give 140%. You're gonna give money to this organization that you don't have to live on, but you'll reinvest it back into your organization. There's certain sacrifices you're making because this is your child, but these are your employees. They have a life outside of work. And also, I feel like it's so, like you said about people skills, it's so important. For example, I have two editors in chief for my digital magazine that's going to get launched in February. Um, One works on the creative side, one works on the editorial managerial side. But I know which one is more of a people's person, which one is more that I would, that if we were, when we are running workshops, who I want to lead those workshops because they give, because I'm aware of their strengths. That one person's
Mhm.
better at this than that person doesn't make them any like less useful or incompetent, but you just know who to use for certain roles. And I feel like there's certain like skills like for an organization, passion and also like people skills. That is something you have. It's very hard to develop or is unattainable, like passion. You either have it or you don't, you know. And like but then skills can be taught and I feel like organizations often forget that. They're like always thinking from an operational point of view. You talked about working with, managers and stuff like that. Even though people get you to come up to their organizations, there must be obstacles and resistance points when it comes to implementing initiatives in corporate culture. What do you see as the biggest obstacle or resistant points when it comes to implementing, mental health initiatives or neurodivergent initiatives in neurodiverse initiatives, sorry, in corporate culture?
In all honesty, a lot of the times, it's still considered a nice to have, right? It's not considered as a vital component of work life, even though most organizations will tell you, oh no, workplace well-being for us is vital. We have all these resources. It is now linked with our ESG. But when you take a real deep dive into what they have and what they're doing and how they understand it, you quickly realize that, it is something that is in place. Not because there is a lack of commitment on their side. I think, like most leaders actually do believe that they want their employees to be well and to be happy, but there's still a lack of understanding of how much of their business bottom line is impacted by poor mental well-being. So there's a lot of initiatives in place, but not really a commitment to make them work because there is a lack of understanding, right? Again, should well-being be necessarily linked, on a human level to your business bottom line? My personal perspective would be no, but the reality of life and the reality of what we see every day, in our work is that it is. We know that that's having solutions in terms of or initiatives in terms of well-being that actually work can highly impact your return on investment, right? So this is something that has been proven several times through various studies. I can mention a few, but you will already have a few references in mind. But so this is for me the one of the biggest obstacles is that it's still seen as a nice to have. It is something that is highly if you like, advertised as something to attract talent, but not developed sufficiently to retain talent. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So it all sounds very nice on paper, but when you get there, is it actually working? What are those initiatives, right? And then there's the issue of budget. So do we as a company have a budget for this particular sort of initiatives? And again, this goes back to, is this really that important for us? So it's really about understanding that from the very beginning, from an organizational perspective, what is the organizational or the organization's priorities for that year, and how is that linked to the well-being of their employees? Either way, right? Where can we step in and actually demonstrate the value of these sort of initiatives? And how can we do it in a way where it is so clear to leadership that this is necessary, that there is absolutely no way that they will not implement.
Mm.
But yeah, the obstacles are there, that's for sure. That is a fact of life. I think we have to continue our educational work, right?
Mm. And that comes back to like destigmatization, right? And I feel like, before we get into that, I feel like organizations accept expect these like initiatives to be self-sufficient.
Mm.
But I'm like, it's like expecting a baby to be self-sufficient, it's something that you need to grow and you need to nurture for a while, And even at the end, you're like, you need to nurture it in a different way. And there's a different sort of attention and care that goes into it. But and I think they fail to realise the effort they're putting into these initiatives is the same effort they're going to get back into it from their employees. And they don't
Fully
see
agree with
that.
that.
It doesn't
Mm.
doesn't cross their minds.
It's again, it's an education work, right?
Hmm. It's a nice to have, but and I can imagine retention levels will go lower and lower and lower every single year, or even every quarter, depending on how bad and toxic the environment it really is. And it's like, and I feel like there's when you go into these workplaces, how do you approach creating that awareness and reducing that stigma surrounding mental health or neurodivergence within an organization? If they have that sort of
Mhm.
nice to have attitude.
Right. I think you made a very, very interesting and important point a second ago when you said that, like as an employee that joins an organization, you are given all these benefits. You are being told that you are, maybe being awarded best place to work for. There are many different awards that are given nowadays for this sort of initiatives. And then you get there and you can't see any of it, right? So I'm sure that's happened to more than one person, including myself. The intention is there. Is anyone doing anything about it? And it can feel really disheartening because it's fake, right? It feels as if it's fake. So there are all these things for me to avail of. But in reality, on my day-to-day work, my manager treats me really badly, doesn't know how to communicate with me. The culture says that these are our values, but no one lives them, right? And I feel like there's a lack of integrity in this organization because this is what we're being sold or told, and this is the reality. This is something that I've heard so much and experienced myself, that it makes any effort in a way not worthy to even be implemented. Let's put it that way. So I think to begin with, we need to start with, like, as I was saying, the education piece with leadership. So what is mental health and why is it important? Why is it important for your organization? Not only for you as a human being, not only for your employees as human beings, but as an organization. Like, what are the benefits that you're going to see economically? Because at the end of the day, this is what is going to matter to the people that are actually, like investing in these initiatives. What will be the financial impact for your organization by implementing these initiatives, right? First and foremost. Then, from my perspective, then there needs to be a multi-pronged approach to this, right? So mental well-being is not only providing apples and, exercise vouchers or, pizza day in the office. All those things are, can be pleasant, but they need to be backed up by real support, right? So what most organizations do, and I think you'll be familiar with this, is they provide an EAP, which is an employee assistance program. These are very important because they provide, if you want, crisis point solutions for situations where it is really needed. So let's say that you're in a point in your life where you feel suicidal. At least you have a number that you can call immediately. You will be spoken to immediately. They don't only deal with mental health issues, right? They can also deal with legal aspects, particularly if you're an expat in a different country and you don't really know how to approach your taxes there, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there is a variety of things that EAPs do. What EAPs today cannot do is provide a continuum of care in the mental health of an employee, right? So you would have a given number of sessions with an EAP in terms of mental health. generally between 6 and 8. Some organizations have more, some have less. This is really, like dependent on what the organization needs are. But that's it. What happens is that people generally, if they're suffering from some mental health issues, they will need a longer treatment than 6 or 8 sessions. Many of them will need 24, others will need 16. Even if you have other mental health solutions in place, like let's say a counseling system or a self-help app, right? There is no continuum of care. If I was now to be referred back after having my treatment with my EAP, right? To refer back to the NHS, for example, to have talking therapies, I would have to start with a new clinician, tell my story from the very beginning. So any progress that I've done in terms of, like maybe understanding certain things or having starting to develop a habit, or there's many different things that can be used in terms of treatment. And I would have to begin from the very start. And that is already going to remove about 50% of the people from the equation. So even though they still need treatment, even though the issue is not fully resolved, just not at a crisis point anymore, but they still have very moderate symptoms, moderate to high, they're going to start from the very beginning. This is not great, right? So from the employee level, you need something, you need to have an initiative in place that provides continuous support from the continuum of mental health. So from prevention to general treatment to crisis point solutions that can be scaled up or down. This is my perspective on things after X amount of years in the industry, right? Then you also need to be able to really create a culture of well-being, as we were saying. This is one of the most important factors, because having all these solutions in place for the employee don't mean anything if they are not supported and backed up by the people that actually lead the organization. So from leaders to managers, as we were saying, but also general teams, right? So what are you doing to really create that atmosphere of psychological well-being? What are you doing within the organization? Do you have webinars every now and then for different topics that people can, join ad hoc? Are you having programs that really focus on, employees and what they need, financial well-being and how that is linked to mental well-being? Mental well-being is composed of so many different factors, your health, your finances, your relationships, communication, the workplace itself. So there has to be an approach or a number of initiatives, because one provider is not going to be able to serve all those approaches, but it needs to be really a holistic solution, if you like, right? And this is how you start. And you keep working at it, and you keep refining and finding what works best, what you get best reviews, if you like, what is really creating change, and you measure. Again, a very important factor. How are you measuring anything that you have in place? Do you know what impact it's having? Are people actually coming back to what they've learned? Are they using these skills? So all these things, I think, are necessary in terms of really creating that culture that we were talking about, right? What do you think?
I think culture is really, really important. I feel like to build that, it needs to be consistent. It needs to be every step of the way needs to be thoughtful in terms of how it's done, how is it executed, and I feel like that is that needs to be coming from an organizational point of view as a leadership, but also you need to be asking people who are on the floor what they need and what they want. And if you cannot do that, or you do not do that, then it's going to be the same situation again and again and again. And the time you've invested into it absolutely means nothing. But yeah, and I think it's that by removing a barrier, you need to be constantly checking in if it does actually work, because your companies or your employees' needs are going to change as time goes on. It's like, if one need is met, another need comes up. I think it just needs to be holistic. If it's holistic, it's not going to work. And it's very hard to do. I can imagine, the bigger your organization. But yeah, but I think it's like there's ways to go about it. And I think there's a social responsibility that people do have, that duty of care. And I feel like employers often forget that they do have a duty of care. Um, just because, they're adult with capacity doesn't mean the duty of care ends there. Because I've heard stories about something like physical, like people don't even look after people's physical. Like I don't know what they expect the mental health and other mental health to follow. Like somebody, hurt their leg or like needs, has an allergic reaction, they need to go to A&E immediately, but you don't want to cover the taxi for it. But it's a workplace incident. That's your responsibility. It's happening on your premises. Deal with it. It's just some people are just money hungry. It's like they want to
They
keep the
are.
money in the organization for organizational purposes. There's no organizational purposes if your employees are not there. There's nobody to run your organization, nobody to sustain your organization.
I fully agree, but sorry to interrupt you. I think that there's also the perspective that, or at least from my perspective, after thousands of conversations with particularly, C-level HR leaders, I'd say that people are not intrinsically greedy or intrinsically bad in general, right? There's always the odd one, but I would say that the majority of leadership actually is very human, has gone through issues themselves, understands the need to have this in place, but finds it difficult, to sell it internally to the rest of leadership.
Exactly.
Right? They find it difficult. And this is where we, as consultants, need to come in and really find a way to make the message so clear, so consistent across the board, and so impacting that they feel armed with the knowledge, and the confidence to be able to have these internal discussions, right? So a lot of the times I would offer to come in and speak with the rest of leadership, and provide that perspective, backed by science, backed by numbers. I think that tends to be very important. But as you know, every human being has their own different way of communicating, of processing information, of some people will want to talk numbers, other people will want to listen to, impact in well-being in general from personal perspectives, more history telling. So it really depends who you're speaking with within the people that hold the purse strings, if you like.
Yeah.
But in general, they're not bad people whatsoever. They're very kind people. They're trying to do the right thing. They just don't want to invest in something that will have, zero impact on the bottom line or actually make them lose money, right? And then you have to think that a lot of these people in leadership tend to be on the older side of age, if you like, and of many different cultural backgrounds. So I remember speaking with a CEO in Italy that didn't understand this thing about mental health, right? For him, it was like, get on with it. He was 82 years old, CEO of a huge company. In no, how to say, he was very clear about letting me know that mental health was a hype and that, like people just have to get on with things and just get on with life because this is what he had been told. And it took me many different conversations with him to no, I wouldn't say convince him because I don't think he could be convinced, but to help him understand, that actually people don't just get on with things, they might put on a face, but it will impact them further along the line, right? And that people can very easily be supported with their getting on, right? So it really depends, but in general, people are good and they want what's best for their employees, for the company. But it's about really giving them the information that is clear enough that for them to understand. And that's where the difficulty lies for us, right?
What do you think? You talked about, the misunderstanding, the misconceptions, or even the myths, right? Being hyped, trends, whatever it is. Yolby, what are some common misconceptions or myth about like whether it's workplace well-being, mental health, neurodivergence?
Right. So I think that more than misconceptions, there is a huge lack of basic understanding,
Exactly,
right?
I do.
Also, we are talking, like enterprise organizations are of varied industries. So it is not the same to be a retail organization than to be a construction organization or an oil and gas organization or, a banking organization. They all have their particularities. And that is something that needs to be accounted for. Who are you speaking with, right? So if I know that the organization that I'm speaking with is one where it's predominantly middle-aged men that are working in very lonely environment for very long hours, right? Very low pay, then my message needs to be completely different than if I'm speaking with someone in the, let's say, law industry, right? Where maybe they have very long hours, but very high pay, a culture of, following their leader, right? So attending meetings, maybe even if their presence isn't necessary, and working 100+ hours a week so that they can be made partner, et cetera, et cetera. So really, I think we need to really start focusing on the needs and the particularities of each industry, which is a mammoth task in itself. But without that, you cannot reach with the right message. In my opinion, there is a lot of stigma still attached to mental health, right? So a lot of the times we like to talk about energy. So how's your energy? Is it high? Is it low? Right? Mental energy, emotional energy. Why? Because the word itself, mental health, can be seen as having negative connotations already, right? So these are things to take into account in different conversations that we're having, I think, particularly for the different industries. But yeah, there's a lot of stigma still around. I would say that this is the first and most important obstacle to reaching people, for sure. And let's not forget about cultural differences.
I was about to just get on that intersectionality.
Yeah.
It complicates things into the way that you would approach things. But how do you I'm sure you were going to get into it, but how do you navigate the intersectionality with other parts of, diversity and inclusion? It must be
Well, I think
difficult.
it is difficult, and particularly as a neurodivergent myself, sometimes I have to really think about it, because my way of thinking is one that takes into, has a wide perspective of things, right? And I forget that not everybody thinks that way. And it's fine. It's not like mine is correct and others are not. Everything is absolutely perfect the way it is. It's just about understanding that the way that you express yourself or what you hold as important might not be at all the same as someone else's, right? So in terms of neurodiversity, I think that there is a lack of understanding there. There is still a lack of understanding, and that is nobody's fault. It is nobody's fault, because I tell you, my degree was in clinical and health psychology, right? My thesis for my master's focused on the effects of parent self-training on preschool ADHD. However, I was only diagnosed at 38. Go figure. So, it is a story that I like to tell because it's quite funny. Like, how did I never even myself imagine that I had ADHD? So this just goes to prove that really ADHD, for example, and I'm only speaking about ADHD and neurodiversity, is not only ADHD. You've got autism, you've got dyslexia, dyspraxia. There's a huge range there, right? A lot of it is overlapping, a lot of it is comorbid with each other. But it's not only ADHD. Let's just clarify that. But if I didn't know, and that was my thesis for my master's, how would anyone in the general public know, right? So again, we need to redouble our efforts in general as a society, and in different countries, in different settings, to understand what this is, because it's still estimated that a large proportion of adults that have it have not yet been diagnosed. even though there is a massive surge. The massive surge is only there because we are now understanding how neurodiversity presents itself in the different conditions better. Do we understand it fully? Not even close. Are we studying the right populations? We've just started really looking at women. Like, for example, ADHD was really thought of as something that only little boys that were very active, and very disruptive suffer from. We now know that it can present completely differently for girls, right? Hence why so many have been underdiagnosed. So it is a work in progress, I would say. We are making huge strides in progress. It doesn't help when you get documentaries such as the recent BBC one on, that portrayed ADHD as being overdiagnosed in the UK or misdiagnosed. I am sure there are cases everywhere. However, I can assure you from the research that I'm doing, and again, this is one of the strengths of ADHD people and autistic people, is that we hyper focus on the topics that are of interest for us, and develop a massive passion on a particular topic and will not rest until we know everything there is to know about it. So the reality of the situation is that we're still learning so much about it. We're still learning the link to genes, to genetics. So how do we expect organizations to be able to provide accommodations for ADHD? Well, we're just learning it in the more medical fields, if you like, right? However, we do know a series of things that organizations can do, and they can do across the board. They are not, let's say, financially taxing to them. They can be easily implemented, and they can have huge positive repercussions on their employee population, right? But there needs to be an understanding that there is a proportion of individuals in the organizations that have these particular conditions that can be a massive asset to the organization, right? Once the stigma is removed and the positives are highlighted, and how to best support those particular individuals, right?
Yeah. I think there's often times where people are, I've noticed this is like people sometimes understand the strengths of, and really value the strengths of people who are neurodivergent, but they, will support them in the highs when, when things work out for them or their organization. But when it comes to the lows where, sensory overload, they might get distressed, they might stim a bit more or whatever it is, then they're like, oh, yeah, this is not our problem,
Yeah.
And it's as well. And I'm like, with every single employee you have, you need to support their highs and their lows when they're working with you. And it doesn't change because they're neurodivergent. And sometimes it's much more like physical, and it's much more like, it's not like external, it's more internal. No, it's external, not internal. And that throws people off. And I'm like, it's just a different way of processing things. And it looks so intimidating to them. And I'm like, because you don't understand it, it's not, that doesn't become a reason to be intimidated of it. You need to figure out, what it is they're doing. So if it's stimming, like, oh, okay, it's stimming. Why is it happening? Is it because it's like anxious? Because it's too much at times? And figure out the root causes behind it. Because if you're going to just scratch the surface level, it's not going to work. You need to find the root cause to solve or help with the situation. And I feel like sometimes you need to deal with the lows as well. I think that's what people don't realize is, if you don't understand it, just have a conversation with the person. I think from my experience, I think neurodivergent people are quite open. I know as a neurodivergent person myself with both autism and ADHD, I think I'm quite open about talking about my experiences. And if you ask, I'm pretty sure people, tell you what they need. And if they don't know, it's something that you guys figure out together.
Absolutely. I think there's also something that needs to happen, which is that this idea that being neurodivergent comes with a huge amount of negatives needs to change. Like, it's not, oh, I'm hiring a neurodivergent person, so they're going to need extra help, or they're going to find this difficult. I think like the vision already, the initial thought about neurodivergence is very skewed towards the negative, right? It's like extra effort, extra work. They might not be able to cope. They might not, right? At least this is my experience in the workplace. And what they don't realize is that most neurodivergent people are actually extremely resilient because we've had to mask all of our lives just to be able to be part of society, right? So what the only difference here, I would say, is that it's incredibly taxing to our nervous system. It's incredibly taxing to our emotional well-being, you know. Do we talk about it? No, we get on with it, don't we? Like you speak with most neurodivergents, we make jokes about it because that's the only thing that we can do at this point, right? But I know for a fact that a lot of people don't actually want to tell their employers that they are neurodivergent because there's such stigma attached to it. And yet it is included in their L&D policies, right? We need to hire this amount of neurodivergent people, or this needs to be part of our inclusion policies, but there's no understanding of it in reality. No training, no resources, no ERGs. So that needs to change, in my opinion. It needs to change, and it needs to change pronto, because a supported neurodivergent employee can be your biggest asset.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it's about how you utilize that individual. Like, if you want certain parts, you need to get certain parts out, but you need to provide certain initiatives or incentives. It's not like a give, like often, I think it's a very corporate thing to do, and it's very common. I'm not saying this is, does not, like, I don't understand why it happens, but it's a lot of times, a lot of take. And I'm like, take doesn't always work. So yeah, I think, that's a bit, that's what I have to say.
I find it always quite a difficult topic to discuss, not because of the stigma attached to it, but simply because I feel that I still have so much to learn about it myself, right? I'm still getting to know myself. So I was diagnosed 3 years ago. I was still doing my deep dive, and I still feel like the more I learn, the less I know, right?
Exactly.
I'm still trying to accept the fact that I find some things more difficult than others, or forgive myself for when I have my decision paralysis, or there are so many aspects of these conditions that are difficult to process even for ourselves that it's even task, honestly.
Yeah,
do you feel that same way?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel like when I think I know my autism and my ADHD, I don't. And then it's so different is because I can't go to anybody else. I can, but like let's just say like we're friends and I go to you, but your ADHD will present completely different from mine. I may understand certain aspects, but you might not truly understand mine. And you'll be like, that's a bit strange. Like, I don't have that, like there's so much. I think there's stigma within the neurodivergent community itself, but it's also so different. It's like, where do I learn? Because there's no books on it. And especially being females, all the research is done on white males, especially at a certain age, so from 8 to 14. And I'm like, this is not the demographic I am in. How accurate is this research? How am I going to apply this to myself? It just doesn't make sense. And I'm just like, I need support, and I just don't know where to go. And if I go to professionals, then I'm like, do I have to explain to them what neurodivergence is and how it affects me? And then you get frustrated because you're like, what is there not to get? And you're like, oh wait, I didn't have this conversation with them. There's 500 other professionals I've had it with, but not this professional. And explaining it, and then the most question that I find the most annoying, it's not an annoying question itself, I just don't know the answer. What do you need? How can we support you?
I hate that with a passion. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know. You tell me, and I'll say yes or no. Like, and I'm like, even like access to work, right? I have that. They're like, what do you need? And I'm like, well,
I relate so much to you on that particular topic. You have no idea how much I relate to you. It's like, how can I tell you what I need when I don't even know myself most of the time what I need?
Yeah. And it's a constant like journey, I feel like. And I feel like it is so frustrating that I'm like, who do I go to for this? And I can't go to my neurotypical friends. My neurodivergent friends are going to get it to an extent, but they're not going to understand the whole thing. Um, and I'm just like,
It's a very lonely road.
yeah,
Very lonely road. I agree
very
with
low.
you. It's very, very big. It's a lonely road. I agree with you. I find it very difficult even to discuss with my family. I feel like my family, out of anybody that I could speak with, are probably the ones that understand it the least and have least interest because it really distorts everything that they thought they knew about me, you
Mm.
know?
I'm not a different
So
person. Yeah,
yeah.
that's another thing. I'm like, I'm not a different person. I'm the same person, but I've finally identified what my needs stem from. Like, nothing's changed. Same person.
I think it stems really, at least my difficulty. My mom passed away 4 years ago now. So I think she was a neurodivergent one in the family. My brother is clearly neurodivergent, but refuses to get any sort of diagnosis. Go figure out why. I think for him, there's a lot of stigma attached to it. But my mom was definitely neurodivergent, knowing what I know now, right? Knowing
Yeah.
what I know now. However, when I got that diagnosed and I tried to discuss the topic with my father, it was like hitting a brick wall that was at least, I don't know, 1 meter thick. This is what I can tell you, right? Why? And when I was trying to think, because it was highly frustrating how defensive he was about me being diagnosed. Like it really took me out of comfort because I thought, well, it's my dad. He will try to understand and he will try to learn about what ADHD is because he loves me and he will try to support me. And my father is that sort of very intelligent and very kind human being where he would always try to do that, right? And always be there for you. So when I hit that brick wall with him and he was so dismissive of it, do you know what he told me? He told me, I will never forget it. He told me, okay, but don't get obsessed with this. And it was the most painful thing that anyone could have ever told me at the time. And then I started thinking about it, and it took me a long while to kind of like come to terms with the fact that and understand that in reality, it makes him feel guilty that he's
Yeah.
done something wrong for me to have ADHD, right? That is what he hears, even though it has nothing, none of it, or none of what I've said has been, even directed towards that way of thinking, right? But that's what he heard. And that's why he reacted that way.
Yeah.
It's a tough one.
I
It's a tough one.
Yeah, I've heard that before from people, not my family, I'm not in contact with them. But I'm like, but it's the way that I am and I'm like, it's like when somebody has diabetes, I'm like, and they not I feel like obsessed is the wrong, but let's just say obsessed for argument's sake, right? But you're like, well, the blood sugars, if it drops, they're gonna die. And I'm like, well, if I don't look after my autism and tend to its every need, I will literally kill myself. And I'm not joking. Do you know what the suicide rate for autism is?
I don't know what the rate is per se, but I know it's high.
It's high. Yeah. I'm like, do you know what the autism rate is? I mean, the suicide rate is for people with autism. And I'm like, and I have other needs as well. I have complex PTSD. I have an emotionally and personality stable, emotionally unstable personality disorder. Both as well are neurodivergent conditions as well. So I have in essence, I have four neurodivergent conditions, and they all have have similar like traits or like symptoms, but they're all very, very different.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what my needs gonna be like. You know what? I can't cope, when I go to work, I can't really cope in an office. Usually book a room to the side and work there. Again, my ADHD's like, what's outside? What's going on? Oh, that person's there. Should I say hello? And my autism's like, no. Our trauma's like, that person could potentially hurt me. I know everybody hears DBS check, but because somebody's DBS check doesn't mean they're safe. And there's so many thoughts going on. And I'm like, you don't, and people don't realize is things like autism and ADHD will kill you if you do not look after it. You know, things need to be nurtured and cared for. And because you cannot see it, or because it doesn't necessarily mean it will deteriorate my physical health, I've offered like symptoms, you know, that will kill me if I don't see my dietitian, I don't see my occupational therapist. There's things that, you know, if I don't take care of my autism, but let's just use that as an example, everything else is going to fall apart. Because it's not physical, or because it's not something I need to take medication for per se, doesn't mean shit. And if I'm telling you this and you still don't understand, that seems like a you problem, but you need to let me do what I need to do for myself.
100%. 100%. I can understand that you don't know how to support me. I can understand that. But what you cannot do is stop me from getting what I need. You should try to support me in getting what I need, even if you don't know what it is. Even if you need me to tell you, even if, you know, we need to do research together. I completely agree with you. And I relate so much, you know, it was really hitting hard when you were saying those things, because what people don't understand, and most of the time, even we don't understand until we start really delving into it and getting diagnosed for more and more conditions, is that neurodivergence comes with comorbidities. That is a fact. The comorbidities can be pretty serious. I suffered with bulimia for a huge number of years. And it was only after, even through pregnancies, which is very shameful. That's another thing that comes with it. Shame, guilt, you know, feeling like you're broken. You know, you were born broken. There's something wrong with you. Trauma, you know, not feeling rejected, not feeling accepted by society. It is very difficult to deal with. Hence why I always say that, you know, like, don't underestimate your neurodivergent colleagues, because they are probably the most resilient and strong people that you will ever meet.
Yeah.
And adaptable, because we have to be. Many of us have ADHD and autism together. Many of us have dyslexia and ADHD together. Or, you know, like, they tend to go hand in hand a lot of the time. Why? Because your brain has developed differently. The shape of your brain, the way that your neurons fire, the neurology of your brain is entirely different. So it is likely that they go hand in hand with a lot of comorbidities. At the same time, all that trauma that you go through your life and all that emotional pain that goes with it, which is a fact of life, you know, also somatically creates a lot of different chronic conditions in your body and autoimmune diseases. Most people with ADHD that I know, and, you know, sorry for focusing on ADHD, it's just because the majority of people that I know have ADHD, you know, in terms of the neurodivergence that they have, but they also have an autoimmune chronic condition because of all the years of not treating their neurodivergence, right? And like you said, medication can help or not help, or, you know, actually hinder at some points. Like, I had an issue with my medication where I wasn't sleeping for over a year, right? Yeah. And I was too shy and felt too ashamed that it wasn't working for me, because again, that meant that I was flawed. So it's working for everybody, but it's really making me insomniac, and that's affecting my work, but I can't tell anybody, and I'm trying to help myself with my doctor, but at the same time, it makes me feel really bad about myself. You know, like, it's a snowball thing, right? So there's a part of me that understands clearly that people that do not struggle with a, you know, neurodivergent condition will be unable to understand the depth of what we have. But they can learn some of the aspects that compose it, and how to support, or not to take, you know, certain things to heart when we speak, or, you know, to just simply let us express ourselves the way that we need to be expressed, or accept that we might need quiet time. We might need a darker light. We might need you to be quiet for a little bit. We might need you, you know, or we might need to work it from our houses, because that's what works best for us. Everybody's going to be different. We cannot expect our employers, for example, to be experts, but the minimum is for them to have an understanding, a basic understanding of different, I cannot speak now, neurodivergent conditions, and how to best support them in the workplace. That is the minimum. And that should be a given today with what we know today in any workplace. Small, medium, large. That doesn't matter.
Exactly. I feel like when it comes to like is the physical side of things that you mentioned as well. Like when I was in my biological home, this was when I was before I was 14 and 7 months. That's when I left. I would get really intense stomach pains, and it would happen. And by looking at my medical reports, it happened around every Easter time, but it would happen multiple times into the lead up. And during Easter, after Easter, whatever. It was really, 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 really painful. I went to like the hospital. I always went to as an emergency. They saw me. They said it's nothing. Saw me. Said it was nothing. I'm coming back so much. They're like consultant after consultant after consultant, head of pediatrics. Everybody saw me, and there was nothing wrong with me. Physically, there was nothing wrong with me. And then I went to hospital for the first time, and this junior doctor, her responsibility was going through all my notes from the day that I was born till current. And she was like, "There's nothing physically wrong with you. It's all the psychosomatic symptoms of trauma that is, manifested in your body and has caused you such intense stomach aches, where it feels like there is like kidney stones or ulcers in your stomach, but there's absolutely nothing there." And I think it's so crazy. The body does keep score. Bessel was right at that one.
100%.
And, but it was like people forget it does physically manifest. What people can relate to, I think, well, quite a lot of people, when something new is about to happen or something and they get anxious, the stomach will hurt. But the intensity it happens to us is unbelievable. People don't realize that. And then having to go through that in everyday life. And I feel like it's even swearing. I swear a lot. Even if I make a conscious effort not to swear, and let's just say I was gonna be like, "Oh my god, that's so fucking annoying," and then I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna swear, but I don't want to swear because I don't think the people around me will receive it well." My body will start to ache. My like hand will start to like stop working because I'm trying to keep it in and my body's not allowing it. It needs to come out and it needs to come out now, or else your body's just gonna like stop working. I've had it before when I've been in so much like anxiety. My back stopped working, my legs stopped working after seeing my father out on the streets because he walked me home. Like, things like that could really paralyze your body. And people think, oh, it's just a 5 minute thing or a few minutes. Like everybody gets it, but they don't realize how long it actually takes. And these symptoms don't just sometimes it's instant. Like, this paralysis in like physical type. But they don't realize it can be hours or it can develop overnight. You'll be fine, the adrenaline's going, but as soon as your adrenaline stops, that's it.
I agree.
And there's a lot of shame associated with it because why am I different from my peers? They're the same age as me. What are they doing? And there's some things that people I think fail to realize is like there's certain things that you're doing that other people are not doing. Like my friends right now, most of them, if they're not on a gap year, they're at university, the first year of university, and I'm like in my head, I'm like, I'm not doing that. What is wrong with me? Why can't I do it? I'm doing my A levels. And then it's just that acknowledgement. I think employees need to do this the same. This is the point that I'm trying to make. Is you need to acknowledge that you want this person to excel so much, but are you giving them the tools and resources? And you need to take into account, like, okay, let's just say they've gone on medical leave. Well, things are going to take longer to do. I'm still doing my A levels. I'm just started last year, this year, sometime anyway, and I'm going, and it's going to take me a while. But your neurodivergent or employee is doing so well on other things. Like for example, may still be doing my A level, but I run an organization with 80 members of volunteers. Like it's two very different things, and you need to acknowledge that. And if you're not acknowledging that, your people are not going to stay around. People, sooner or later are going to realize their value and going to leave. And it's going to manifest in so many different like issues. Like, for example, if it's a stomach ache and it's very intense, they might not even come to work. They might not be able to, then there's so much sick leave. It's the environment that you create. And you forget that these people are there at work, like they're at school, like they're there more than they're with their families.
100%. 100%. Some of them have children. Some of them have, old parents that they need to care for. Some of them are going through a divorce. Some of them, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, being neurodivergent just adds to the dimension of things.
Yeah.
But the reality is that it's busy for everybody, It's busier than it's ever been. There is this very unhealthy culture of, productivity. Productivity over everything else. Productivity. What does it mean, productivity? What is productivity without quality, right? There comes a point. Recently I was working until 1 o'clock in the morning for days on end because I felt, probably due to my neurodivergent, my ADHD, that I had to do double in order to achieve the same level as others, or that, if I didn't work that much, people would think that I wasn't worthy of that position, or, and in the end, you just burn out. Yeah. It's just the way it is. So that intuition that you're talking about, like understanding yourself, understanding your body, what it's trying to tell you, I think comes in as a magnificent tool for you to take action on your life and to start living with integrity, whether you're neurodivergent or not. I think that's the most important thing is, am I in the right spot for me?
Yeah.
Is this something, like sometimes we have to do things we don't enjoy in every single job, but is this aligned to my values, to who I am, to what I want to bring into the world? Are the people around me people that are helping me grow and learn, right? And also shine, because we spend most of our lives hiding, in particular, in our cases, most of our life hiding, because when we show ourselves, we get beaten up, or this is the perception that we get. So we have this fear of shining. We have this fear of being ourselves, Can I be authentic? Can I be authentic? Can I be myself? Can I take the mask off? At least a little bit, because I'm still learning who I am, right? I've been masking so much that I'm still learning who I am. Can I take it off? Are all those questions answered in the positive? Yes. I'm in the right place. No. I need to get out, right? Sometimes, even when you are in a very, very supportive organization, and I know this from experience, you can still face these issues, right? Because it's still not aligned to who you are. But that's a completely different story. That's something that we all, as human beings, need to learn how to read in ourselves, and how to really honestly answer in terms of those questions, as opposed to complain about, our environment and not do anything about it. There's nothing worse than an individual, we all have our own responsibility for our lives as well, right? So where our employer has a care of duty, as you very rightly said, we also have the responsibility of acting for our highest good. And that comes with a lot of pain and a lot of honesty for oneself, right? Employers can do what they can do. Most of the time, they're not even doing that. They need to step it up. They need to learn about it. But I can assure you, from my perspective, they're all trying to. They are all trying to. We're still at the beginning stages of what I call the health revolution, in a way, right? Of understanding health as a whole. Because it is a whole. There is no mental health without physical health, without emotional health, there just isn't, right? And we're just at the beginning stages of understanding how it is all interlinked, how you cannot have one without the other, right? And how you can support all of them at the same time. So we need to be patient in a way. We need to continue the mammoth task that is education and providing resources and teaching people, and accept the frustration that comes with that, because it can be a very slow process, right? Very, very slow process. But keeping the faith that what we're doing is so valuable.
Yeah.
Really, it is so valuable. I think it is changing the world slowly. I think people, that awareness growing is making all the difference.
Absolutely.
Even if sometimes it doesn't feel like we're doing much, right? Yeah. But we are. I have faith in that, definitely.
You know what? It was so powerful. It was great. It was great. What you said was absolutely true, and it's absolutely great.
I love how this is going because it's just so natural, it's just
Yeah. I'm just like, I feel like because we're answering the questions without even me having to ask questions, which is great. This is how like I prefer a podcast to go. It's just great. You're
it
doing
should
well.
be like that. It should be. To be honest with you, I didn't know exactly what to expect, so I kind of like prepared questions without knowing really, because you never know what the question is going to be, right? But I think this is so much more natural and authentic, in the way that you can be yourself, you can express how you feel, and I mean, like my belief and my experience is that when you are authentic, you reach others.
Yeah.
You can feel it.
Yeah,
right?
definitely. The one thing that I usually say in my podcast episodes before we film, which I didn't really feel the need to say that to you because I felt like you were going to be that way anyway. But if you're not going to be honest, don't say anything. Let's just move on. I have questions to come, There's so much. I feel like honesty is what you need when you're speaking about sensitive topics like this. You can't compromise that because there's other vulnerable people that are out there listening to this. And you can't just give them, oh, this is what it looks like when it really doesn't look like that.
Well, that's enabling, right?
Definitely. Workplace trauma, right? When before you guys come in, like, as consultants, there must be so much workplace trauma that's already there, And I don't think people, what? I think, like, from my experience, I feel like employers don't expect people to call it workplace trauma because they're like, well, you don't get abused, like. And I feel like people forget that you can get abused at work. It's not like you're at work, this is a abuse-free zone. Doesn't really work like that, but yeah. Can you to our audience, right? How would you explain workplace trauma? And what are like the common examples that you hear of or see of that employees may experience?
I can give you a very personal experience of mine as examples, to really cover what I'm going to say without giving you a dictionary description of what it is, because I would be unable to do that even if I tried. I would describe as workplace trauma as what stays with you after you've gone through very difficult situations at work, right? So to put it in a different way, we are all human beings. We all have a level of trauma. I don't believe there's anybody in this world that doesn't carry trauma within, their body or their mind, from either childhood or different moments in their life. But we all carry some level of trauma. And you come already with that to the workplace. And in the workplace itself, from my experience, unfortunately, and this is regardless of the size of the company, it can feel at times as if you are back in primary school, right? So it can be cliquey, it can be abusive, you can get harassed, there can be miscommunications, there can be clashes in personality, there can be misalignments in, understanding each other, there can be cultural differences, there is a huge amount of things. So it's for an enterprise company that has, let's say, presence in different countries, you will see this even more often, right? So because you're mixing a lot of different ingredients to make a soup, let's say, right? It is bound to create some tensions, and it is bound to provide learning opportunities for everybody involved, if we phrase it in a more positive way. But the reality is that workplace trauma does occur. A lot of the times we see this between managers and employees, right? There's employees that feel they are being bullied. It can be by their manager, or it can be by a colleague, or it can be by higher leadership. But this happens. I've experienced it myself, right? It happens. It can be that you already carry your own trauma and you're put in certain situations and you're projecting your own trauma into those situations and, building into that. I know many people that have been harassed for the color of their skin, for their nationality, unconscious bias as well are there, well, if this person is from this place, they will do X, right? And all this labeling and this unconscious bias and this lack of communication can and do create trauma for people. And it is right. It is right. Now, what organizations can do to support their employees is, first of all, something I've noticed not many do. So as you know, most organizations have anti-bullying and anti-harassment policies, which is really the steps that they're going to take if that situation ever arose, right? What organizations need to understand is, first, is the environment conducive to an employee being able to discuss this, right? Is the environment open enough, or will the employee feel that they will be retaliated upon if they do? Very important, right? Whether it's harassment, whether it's bullying, whether it's any sort of issue. But really, I would condense it into those two, harassment and bullying. Number two, do our policies include a safe space for that person, right? Because we all know that HR will support the organization at all times. So who is the employee actually speaking with as a first line? Is there anybody that can be neutral about it? That can listen to the facts, that can, observe, that can take notes, that can absorb the situations. Third, once you prove or disprove, what steps are you taking that are for the highest good of all people involved? Because let's say that you've been harassed or bullied, right? Other than going the legal route, which nobody necessarily wants to go because it's draining, both financially and emotionally. So generally people try to resolve it in-house, even if it's through the means of mediation or, involving, let's say, third parties within the organization that are not necessarily linked to either people involved, right? What are you putting in place? I had a situation where I had a formal grievance that I placed upon my manager because from my perspective, I was being bullied, right? Why was this happening? Because you are not allowing recordings to take place between manager and employees one-on-ones. Maybe this should be allowed, That was for this particular company, right? So you should be allowing these things to be recorded or to be some sort of written, let's say, summary of what the discussion was so that it can be referred back to. Because what tends to happen a lot of times, and this has happened to countless people that I've discussed with, is that let's say that you're having with your line manager, which is generally, I feel, the person that can most affect your working day, right? You might have an issue where you feel you're being bullied or vice versa, right? But how can you prove it? Because once you put in a formal grievance, you need to be able to prove the basis of what you're saying, right? So do you have policies in place as an organization where managers or employees have to write a summary of what the discussion was, what was, first line? Second, is there a safe space to speak about this? And third, what are you going to do about it once this has been cleared one way or the other? In my particular case, it was partly proved in my favor, mostly because I had limited evidence, on paper of what had happened. A lot of it was discussions that had happened in person. And again, you can understand, coming from an ADHD perspective, the frustration, of not having written records on stuff, and also really trying to get someone to understand that the last thing that you need in your day, is to go through that sort of process, right? So are you being fair with what you're seeing as an organization, and what are you offering once the issue has been resolved? Because if your offer is, you will have to continue working with this person, so how can we best do it? That's not going to be good enough, right? So what do you do as an organization? What are your policies? And I think this is very important. Second, are you actually creating an environment that is conducive to this sort of behavior or accepting of this sort of behavior, right? Whether it's employee to employee or a manager to a staff member, something is happening there where the person that is actually causing the situation, the abuse or the bullying, feels entitled to do so. Why is this happening in the organization? Is there accountability for it? Are they being, what is the situation? And I think this is very important to understand. And there has to be, if you have policies as an organization for bullying and harassment, you need to make sure that they are soundproof, that they are completely encompassing every possible aspect, and that your first priority is to ensure the safety and well-being of the person putting in a grievance. Because that can create the amount of trauma that a situation like that can and does create on that particular person is huge, right? So do you have the resources in place also to support that person during the process? And how are you going to handle the process in a way where it will not negatively impact them? So this is from my personal perspective, what I think should be done. Now, from a legal perspective, there's many different avenues. I would suggest that if you live in the UK and you're experiencing any of these situations, you refer to ACAS or ACAS, which is the body that regulates these sort of issues. You can also contact the health and safety authorities, because this is, at the end of the day, a health and safety issue. If you do not feel safe in the workplace, there is an issue there, and they will investigate independently. So this is another avenue. But definitely make use of those resources. And if you are someone that has any word or any power in regards to creating these policies, make sure that you take into account and that you prioritize the well-being of the person that is, reporting the grievance. So that there is no retaliation against them. Because this is the second thing that tends to happen. Not only are you being bullied or harassed, but you're also being retaliated upon the company, because the company does not want, like a bad reputation to come out, right? So they will keep you quiet. They will do everything that they can to keep you quiet, which creates shame, it creates guilt, it creates unfairness, feeling of unfairness, it creates frustration. It can really bring you down the wrong end of things, right? So I'd say that those are the most important things to think of. And as a human being and an employee, if this is happening to you, regardless of who is inflicting this upon you, my recommendation, number one recommendation, as I would give anybody going through any sort of abusive relationship in their life, is get out and do not look back. Sometimes getting out is more important than getting, if you want, getting justice, because a lot of the times you're not going to get the justice. So just get out, look after your own well-being, but do not stay in a situation that is making you feel that way, whether you're right or wrong. That is the first sign that you shouldn't be there, that you're not where you should be, I'd say. Sorry, I'm very passionate about this because it's a difficult topic to speak about.
As you should be, it is something that, it's a very difficult topic to talk about, but it's very necessary. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much for joining us today on My Trauma's Chronic but I'm Iconics podcast. We had a truly enlightening and enriching conversation with Beatriz, who has shared invaluable insights into neurodiversity, trauma, and the importance of mental well-being in the workplace. Before we wrap up, let's quickly recap some of the key points we covered today. We delved into the meaning and benefits of neurodiversity, debunked common misconceptions, and discussed how neurodivergent individuals can greatly enhance creativity and innovation in the workplace. We also explored the profound impact of trauma, how it benefits at work, and the importance of creating a supportive and psychologically safe environment for all employees. For those who want to dive deeper into this topic, Beatriz has recommended some fantastic resources that we'll be sharing in our show notes. Additionally, if you're interested in consultant services, want to follow Beatriz's work, you can find her contact information and social media links there as well. And to our listeners, we hope you found today's episode as enlightening as we did. Remember, fostering a mentally healthy and inclusive workplace starts with each one of us. By understanding and supporting our colleagues, we can create a better, more productive work environment for everyone. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to My Trauma's Chronic but I'm Iconics podcast. Leave us a review and share this episode with your friends and colleagues. Your support helps us bring more valuable content to you. Thank you for listening. Stay iconic. Until next time.